put anybody on blast or it's a hot mic.
No, the world's a hot mic. You know that. We taught you that at Syracuse. It's all good. It's all good. So you're unique as a guest on this podcast because you're the first actual working journalist I've talked to so far, and also to the best of my knowledge, you've never seen or heard or talked about Hamilton.
That's correct. I have no idea at all what the phenomenon is about.
You gotta get in on that. It is worth the download. I know you're kind of an old school hip hop guy, so you'll appreciate a lot of the music, and it's very, very good. It's so good. But you are a huge Avett Brothers fan, so we'll allow you on the podcast anyway.
My brother-in-law has been trying to get me into Hamilton for the last 4 or 5 months. I guess I got to give in. The rest of the world is.
Yeah. I mean, you got to. I mean, you got to get in on it while you still can. So we are talking with Tyler Dunne from the Buffalo News Today, and wanted to talk because as a football beat reporter and feature writer, I mean, you have a lot of interesting different writing hats that you've got to wear every day. You know, between doing longer features and everyday stuff. So. What's the balance like just from actual writing, doing like your blog posts or like the day-to-day stuff versus the features? Do you approach them differently at all?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what, Brian, I guess it doesn't hurt that I'm not married and I don't have a girlfriend. I don't really have that kind of life, so I've got a little bit more free time to chip away at some of those longer stories because that's what it's about. I mean, when you're on the beat, it's day to day. It's definitely, keeping your head bobbing above water, pumping out 5-6 stories, blog posts a day, the podcast, the live tweeting of press conferences, really bringing that reader, that fan into the locker room with whatever a player is saying. I mean, when LaShawn McCoy says that Chip can't shake expletives, you got to get that on Twitter instantly because it's going to go viral before you even get back to your laptop to write about it. Mm-hmm. So there's that aspect of the job that you have to be instantaneous, 24/7, around the clock. But I still think that readers appreciate that 24-ounce steak. Taking the time to really dig into a longer story and learn about somebody, hear their background, and I mean, this team is just full of personalities and backstories that I've been lucky enough to to tell them, and they've been willing to open up. So. I think that it's really that balance, and maybe that middle ground, that 22 to 25 inch inverted pyramid kind of daily story is really going to the wayside, and it's the two ends of the spectrum of the instantaneous news and tidbits and nuggets, and that other end of the spectrum.
The reasons I wanted to have you on is one of the stories I've mentioned on this podcast before is it Kevin Seymour or Kevon Seymour?
It's actually Kevon
Seymour, yes. The Bills cornerback that they drafted out of USC, and that profile you did on him, which was staggeringly awesome. It was
thank you very much.
So incredibly well done. One of the things the parts I wanted to mention on this individually we can go through, but between this story, you had a very well-received piece on Marcel Darius earlier in the season when he opened up about all the people in his life who had passed away, and you followed up on that. So how are you finding out about these stories, and how you mentioned getting guys open up to them, and obviously that reporting is so important to the writing, but where do you get these story ideas in the first place?
That's a good question. I mean, I think it's one person back at the Daily Orange. I think it was Andy McCullough. He covers the Dodgers now at the LA Times, and we worked together. And I remember him saying this, that it's just so important to remember you got to have conversations, not interviews. Mm-hmm. And you're talking to human beings, not always like interview subjects or athletes. I mean, just keeping it as a conversation at all times and being curious, open-minded, wanting to learn about somebody's world at all times. I mean, that's just kind of how I approach it all the time. And, I didn't really know anything about Kevon Seymour. I just had his cell phone number, and after the Bills drafted him, gave him a call. And the next thing you know, I looked down at my cell phone, and we had been talking for, 49, 50 minutes about his life. I mean, he just has that personality that he wants to tell his story and really let Bills fans know where he comes from. So it's just, getting to know somebody. And it sounds really really simple, but it is simple. I mean, you just got to be curious and want to know where somebody comes from. Get to know them on their level and keep it as a conversation as opposed to a serious interview, point A to point B type of interaction. That's kind of how that one came to be. And once we got into the snake pits and what it was really like in Pasadena, and the fact that 15 yards away somebody's shooting at him point blank and he somehow evaded the bullets. I mean, that's something that you don't hear all the time. I mean, the antenna kind of goes up and you realize, we got to get together. We got to talk about this in person. And next thing you know, we're hanging out on the waterfront in Buffalo, learning more about T-Von Seymour. Marcel Darius, I guess I knew that he had lost some people close to him, so it wasn't all necessarily new. People had known that his brother died, and that back in high school and college he had some losses, but he never really opened up about it at any level. So maybe it was just the timing, maybe it was the fact that our personalities just kind of clicked and he was willing to talk about it. But the more you learned about Marcel Darius, the more you found out that literally everybody close to the guy dies, and it really was gripping.
Getting back to the Seymour, and you talk about when he was getting shot at, and that's very high in the story. And when I remember reading that, like, that to me is like the classic example of the writer thing that we always talk about, right? The get out of the way of the story, because it just presents it really, really fast, and it's very much you can picture it happening. Not just when you were. Tell me a little bit about how, like, reporting that, and then when you sat down to write it, kind of how you decided to present this story that he told.
Sure. Yeah. You know what? Originally, I was gonna write the story off of our conversation on the phone, and I started writing my lead, and he was kind of comparing his life to the cornerback position in general, and it was interesting. But as I'm kind of writing the lead, I'm like, this is just different. There's something deeper here. I mean, this guy has seen things that nobody in Western New York has seen. And then that's when we got together in person. We met up on the Buffalo waterfront, and really, I guess there's just that moment in an interview or a conversation, I should say, with somebody when it clicks in your head, like, this is the lead, or this is the point, this is the angle that's going to make this story. And when he was really standing right on the street there, there's cars going by. I think like a pastor walks by at one point. Fans are walking by, and he literally reenacted that whole scene when somebody just for no rhyme or reason pointed a gun at him and started shooting. I mean, he was ducking and dodging and really acting it out like he was reliving it. And it was just so natural. And in the moment, you could see the emotion on his face, and that him himself kind of was taken back to that day. It's like, oh my God, I mean, this is the lead. I mean, this is where you got to go with this. So it was kind of an easy decision. And then you just realize that, all right, well, what's different about this guy? I mean, these are the stories that make T-Von Seymour. I mean, he told 5, 6, 7 different stories about the snake pits, about being shot at there, about the moment he realized how to be different and how to separate right from wrong. And there's just so many great stories that you're right. You just get out of the way. You let him tell it. You go one story to the next, and you put it all together, and that's what makes this draft prospect. That's what makes T-Von Seymour.
It's that awesome embarrassment of riches problem that you have sometimes when you sit down with your transcript or your notebook and, like, my God, I have so much. Where do I begin? Right.
Right. And that's true. I mean, you definitely feel that sometimes. That's how I felt with this one. And even Darius and other stories, it's like, yeah, you've got so much stuff here. Well, where do you begin? But hopefully these stories, read fast enough where people can keep their attention span locked into the page.
Right. So how do you do that as a writer? Like, how do you try to control the pace enough where you have such kind of you want a deeper story? This is a pretty deep, not super in depth, but it's more than surface level. But while it's trying to keep that pace moving, what do you do as a writer to do that?
I think if you just really have a clear theme, an angle, and you really maybe even write it down, and you remember, all right, this is what I always have to come back to. Every section of a story, I think, kind of has to have a purpose. Mm-hmm. You don't just want to ramble on and on. You can have a great story and all the detail in the world to bring that story to life, but if it's just kind of meandering all over the place and doesn't stick to that angle, that theme, then I it's kind of pointless. So, I mean, you do see that sometimes, and there are a lot of great writers that have the space, whether they're a magazine writer or what have you, that they can meander, and your attention is going to stick to it. It's a little different, I think, maybe with newspaper, where you are in that balancing act of a lot of readers are checking out Bill's news on their cell phone and they want to be in and out. But when they realize it's a deeper story, maybe they are willing to invest that time. But at the same time, yeah, you have to stick to a point, stick to an angle, whether it's with Kevon Seymour, and these are the stories that make him. You want to get in and out with those stories. Marcel Darius, everybody around the guy is dying, and how does that affect him? He's still depressed, really, to this day, or he was last year when we talked about it. You kind of stick to that theme. Just trying to think of some other ones. Terrell Troop, the player that the Bills drafted, one pick ahead, Rob Gronkowski. They're telling his story is a similar thing where, he was dealing with pain and injuries that nobody knew about. So, yeah, I mean, you really do have to just stick to that angle, I think. And it's tough. It's a challenge. I'm not saying I'm perfect by any means. I'm sure there's been a lot of stories in the past where maybe I kind of meandered a little too much, but it's definitely a balancing act.
Does that make you a better writer, you think, that kind of limitation of the medium?
I think so. Yeah, because, I mean, you want to have bite to a story. I mean, it's got to be gripping to some degree and really grab somebody's attention. And it's going to be that person and their stories that bring it to life. So, like you said, you don't want to get in the way and overwrite and dance all over the place because you're going to lose somebody. But at the same time, you don't want to just be boring and plod through it and not bring it to life. So it is a good challenge, I think, because the future of our business is that people are maybe just not as willing to sit down, on their front porch, open a newspaper, and read for 4 or 5 hours. But at the same time, they do want to learn more about their team now more than ever. I don't know what the answer is, but hopefully we're trying to find that balance.
Right. One thing I've noticed in reading a lot of your feature stories is it's hard to explain. So I'll meander while I describe it. But you really kind of use yourself in an interesting way. Like at the end of the Kevon Seymour piece, you say how he asked you, let me know when you got home safe. In the Darius piece, you describe him kind of going back and forth and walking away from you and saying, why the F am I talking about this to a reporter? And so you're not like in the piece, like writing but you often, it seems like you really like show how the interview is playing along with what they're saying. And I love that. I think that's super cool. So I'm wondering, like, is that something conscious that you do, or does it just come naturally? And why do you, when you do that, why do you decide to do that?
I think that we're definitely privileged to be in this position. I mean, covering a sports team, not a lot of people get to do that. So I try to bring that reader to the time and place and be in the moment right there with me. And you're right. I'm trying to think of another one. Brett Favre, when I was at his house, and this is the first time that anybody had really heard from him since the whole Cold War between the Packers and Favre and all the bad blood. I mean, I think he gave a conference call at one point announcing the Hall of Fame stuff, but really he didn't talk to anybody. Mm-hmm. So when I was at his house and I shook his hand and he's taking me to the back pool and we're about to sit down, and you can see on his face that adrenaline start to come back when he's talking about football and the fact that maybe he does want to keep playing and he's got the veins just kind of ripping through his forearm. I mean, it kind of struck me then, man, that this guy still has that competitive itch. So you kind of take the reader through that because that's the privilege we have. I mean, Brett Favre invited us to his house. Marcel Darius is opening us up to his world. Kevon Seymour is reenacting these gripping scenes on a street right downtown on the waterfront. So I think that the reader likes to kind of go through that process with you, and it's good to mix it up. Some leads are going to be a little bit more direct, maybe just dive right into an anecdote in the past, but sometimes these longer features, I really love doing that. I mean, just because, hey, I think that fans want to be there in the moment, right with the players they watch every game.
And what kind of feedback do you get from fans and readers on these longer stories?
It's all good. I think that I think they love them still, and it's encouraging. Whether it's the the metrics and the clicks that you see after the fact, they're still really high, even in a time when the newspaper circulations are declining across the board. I mean, it sure looks like people still love reading these stories, and anecdotally, whether it's Twitter, email, in person, it's all positive. I think that people really do appreciate these stories. They just have to be done right because everybody, not everybody, but a lot of players come from rougher backgrounds or overcame adversity. But what makes this player just different? There's got to be something different about this guy that stands out. So I definitely try to keep that in mind when I do these.
I mean, it really strikes me talking to you too how much the reporting and goes into making a good story, right?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I mean, there's been times, especially during the season, you were asking about that whole balancing act of covering a team day to day and still doing these takeout stories. I mean, that's when it gets tough. The concussion story that I did early last season, I don't know, 3-4 weeks in, was based off a lot of reporting in Canton when I met a lot of these Hall of Famers and talked to them. Carson with the Giants. I mean, we talked at length there in the lobby about all his issues and just kind of banked it. And you could really see that these converging forces of players wanting to do everything to play, the reality of concussions and what these do to you long term, the science growing by the day. It's just such a compelling ordeal that's not going away anytime for the NFL. But anyways, I got to that story during the week, but I didn't want to stop reporting. I had enough to write with based off several different sources and current players, former players. But the one guy that I knew would make this story was Kevin Cobb because he had 4 concussions, because his career ended in Buffalo in such an awful way, and he hadn't really spoken much about his problems. So I got his cell phone numbers for his parents, for friends, for him, and was going all over search engines trying to track this guy down. Eventually, I was able to get a hold of him on Friday, and my flight was taken out to Miami Saturday morning. He was great. I don't know, we talked for a half hour or so. I did a podcast with Tim Graham Friday night. And then on my flight down to Miami, transcribed Kevin Cobb, transcribed Chris Nowinski, the Boston, at the Boston Brain Bank that studies all this. Landed in Miami, and I probably had, I don't know, 4.5 hours or so to write this whole story up. So it was definitely time management, a major time crunch to try to get that story done. But you just do it, and sometimes we all work better under a little pressure. But I wanted to take it up to Saturday because I just knew Cobb, Nowinski, and then I had a comment from the NFL that it would make the story that much more complete. So you definitely have to push the limits of all the time you have. And this is a good time to really thank my editors. I mean, Lisa Wilson, Bob DeCesare, Keith McShay. I mean, all of them really allow us to have that kind of time and our understanding with it.
So are you you need a tight deadline guy?
I'm sorry?
Are you the guy who, like me, who you need the deadline and you're coming up against and you're always hitting it?
Definitely. I mean, yeah, you kind of, what does Andrew Brand always say? Deadlines for action. So I think that's true with all of us, too.
So how long does it usually take you to write one of the longer stories, like the Darius piece or the Seymour piece? I mean, the actual writing. I mean, okay, step back first. Do you do all your reporting before you write, or do you do a little reporting, do a little writing, and kind of mix it up?
Definitely, yeah. I try to do all of my reporting before I even write a word, and transcribe every single word verbatim. Put it on the paper. It's a process, that takes a long time to do. I mean, you want to talk to as many people as you can, transcribe every single word, just because mentally it's going to give you that fuller picture of the player, of the situation, of everything. After you talk to everybody. I guess there's been times probably when I started to write a little bit, but I really try to do 100% of my reporting before I sit down to actually write it up, and then I don't know, maybe a day or two, if that. Hopefully it comes natural to you. I'll usually write a draft and go back and rework a lot of things, reorganize things, and just keep going back. And that whole process, I think is really where you learn to improve as a writer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm lucky to work with a guy like Tim Graham, and in the past, I'm close with like Dan Wiederer at the Chicago Tribune. We've kind of shared stories and helped each other out. It's really good to kind of have allies in the business that you push each other, you make each other better, and that process. If you have the time, I mean, granted, when you're on a flight to Miami, you land and you've got just a few hours to churn something out. You can't necessarily seek that help out, but if you have the time, I think it's definitely beneficial to find a few people in the biz that you can really talk shop with.
And it's funny. Somebody else I talked to here is an author, and he's a much more very methodical writer. Like he said, he's the type of guy who can't write sentence 2 until sentence 1 is done and perfect. And we were talking. I told him, and it sounds like we kind of have the same attitude. And it's got to be it's got to be the newspaper thing. Is you just don't kind of think that way. At least I don't. Like I'm very much a get everything down in a draft type version and then go back and rework and edit and change it. Sounds like that's the way you tend to do these longer pieces too.
Yeah, 100%. Try to just let the mind go and write, get it all out there, and then go back and see how one section connects to the next, one thought connects to the next, smooth things out. Maybe there's a one-liner quote or a little story that you forgot about that you insert somewhere. Maybe a part toward the bottom needs to be thrown up a little higher. I don't know. I really like just kind of get it on paper and then go back and try to reorganize.
Yeah, I mean, I tell my students that a lot. It's the idea of, the real work happens after the first draft is done. Like your first draft is just kind of, whether you take a long time to do it or not, and there's no right way to do it. But it's that idea, like then you can go back and really see what works. And like you said, I think one of the most valuable things you can do, even if you don't have time to have someone else look it over, is rereading it yourself after that time. So important, And I don't know if you're able to do this, and sometimes I can, but printing it out I found helps so much.
Yep.
Just because I don't know, it is like seeing it on a different medium and not on the screen. I don't know, it helps things come out. Seeing it differently, I guess, kind of makes it easier to see what can be made better on it.
So true. I mean, I'm with you all the way. And another thing, little trick. I mean, it sounds so simple, but after I transcribe everything, if it's a longer story, I like to print that out, and then you just kind of lay it all out and just start marking notes all over the place. Like, okay, he said this here at this point of the interview, and then about 20 minutes later, he came back to something that relates to that, and you really can just get a picture and visualize the story like in your mind. I mean, that's what it is. You're telling a story. It's like a movie. There's a plot. There's a climax. There's all those elements that you see when you sit down to watch a movie or sit down to watch a Game of Thrones or a TV show that, the way that they tell it in an interview, it's not going to be perfect all the way through. But once you put it all on paper and then you connect other voices into it, you can see what should go where.
That is always great when you have like a ton of transcripts and notes and stuff, and you lay them all out on your floor or desk, and it feels like a beautiful mind. Like you're trying to get like all the threads on. I agree with you. Transcribing, I had to do that for a lot of research projects, and it's awful in the moment, but it's so amazing when you sit down to write and the story, or what you're going to tell because you've already kind of done that hard work. What's the best thing?
Just down those lines real quick. You just made a good point where when you transcribe it all and you re-listen to every single word of your conversation with somebody, and then you put it on paper, and then you read it again, and maybe you read it again, like you just understand it even more and more and more. Like there'd be that tendency if you just do it once and then start writing, you don't really understand what they were saying and what they meant just one time through. So there's something to that repetition.
So how do you kind of transcribe all these awesome ideals that we're talking about for feature stories to a football game story where you're writing on a tight deadline, or a daily piece? Like how does that transcribe? How does that transfer over?
I guess curiosity is definitely a strong tool still in that game setting. A couple examples would be there was the Bills game against the Texans this past year where there was just like a blown coverage for Houston. Charles Clay is wide open, scores a touchdown that kind of seals the deal. And, a lot of folks will go right to Rex Ryan and get his take, and then go in the locker room get their take. But if you're just kind of curious, I kind of want to know what the hell happened with the Texans on that play. I mean, how was this guy wide open? And Quentin Demps, I think it was the safety who screwed up on the play. And so I went in their locker room. I think it was me and Aaron Wilson from the Houston Chronicle were the only ones at him. And he was just incensed and was giving us one-word answers and was really being a piece of work. So, I mean, that transcript of that interview and feeling that anger from him kind of what made the story. So it's just kind of, really thinking outside of the box. I think that, especially today when everybody sees the game, everybody knows why the team won, everybody has the basics in the moment, you've just got to think outside of the box with game coverage and try to go against the pack every chance you can get.
So what's the best thing you've read recently?
That's a good question. Let's see. I mean, I really loved Lee Jenkins' story off of the Cavs Game 7 win over the Warriors. That was great. I mean, he's got access to LeBron James that no other writer in the country has. So, I mean, I couldn't wait to see what he had off of that game, just from the LeBron stories that he's done in the past. A lot like Chris Ballard and Kobe. Mm-hmm. I mean, anything that Ballard does on Kobe, I just could not wait to read. Same thing with Jenkins on LeBron. And it's hard to get that access, but you know what? I mean, players are going to trust who they're going to trust. They're going to open up to who they want to open up with. And that's the case with both of those writers. And you're going to get the best stories on Kobe, on LeBron from them because of that.
Yeah, that I'll second that piece. It was on SI.com, and it was just, I mean, the details that he had written, and again from reporting, but the details he had on it, and what I loved about it too is obviously he has access to LeBron from stories he's done in the past, but I just appreciated that, in maybe not in a day and age, that sounds too highfalutin, but coming off a story where a lot of people have very strong opinions, and it's like the hot take. Can you give me the Done with Graham hot take noise?
We try.
All right. So the hot take on LeBron, and it was just the tone of that piece was just so measured. Like, it wasn't hysterical. It wasn't like overly laudatory toward LeBron. It wasn't a celebration. It was just a well reported kind of piece, and it looked at Golden State too. I mean, it was really just this incredibly well done, well-rounded view of the series and of the game. And I don't watch the NBA too much. I follow it, but I don't I'm not an obsessive fan, but I love reading about it. And I felt like I came away from that story with such a better understanding of LeBron and of kind of the whole environment around that game. And just it was a longer story, but it didn't feel, it was just overall just an incredibly well done piece.
Because there's a tendency, after a game like that, we instantly want to put LeBron's legacy in context. We usually want to say, what's wrong with Steph Curry? And what does 73-9 mean now? But, I mean, the detail in that story, I love the part where, when it's 3-1, how did the two teams react? And his reporting really drove it. I mean, the Cavs, they had up and downs all season long. They've been schizophrenic all the way through, and they were just calm in that moment. Turn around, Lou, and guys were just saying, "Hey, we've been here, we've done that, we've been up and down all year." I'm sorry, it was the GM who actually said something, and that reality that they've been up and down all year was a huge reason they pulled through. And then on the flip side, Golden State, I'm trying to remember what he wrote, but basically they refused to kind of adjust and change, and were just kind of going through the motions. So it was just the reporting that really drove everything. And you're right. I mean, in today's day and age, we want to have opinions in the moment. And not to say all opinions in the moment are bad, but it's kind of a lost art, like the why behind something. Yeah. And his access, his reporting really came through.
Yeah, it's easy. It's easy to have opinions, and opinions are fun. That's what drive a lot of sports writing and a lot of sports talk and all that. But it is nice to kind of have that change up every now and then, and kind of just a nice kind of look at, hey, this is how something happened, or this is, like you write, this is the story behind this guy who you're going to be watching on Sunday and all that. And that really seems to kind of is a theme for a lot of your writing too. I know you said this in my classes in the past, but these guys are guys beyond dudes on your fantasy football team. You know, they're people, and you know, kind of telling their stories is just an important thing I think we can do in this business.
Absolutely, and I think that the players themselves kind of appreciate that. I mean, they're all on social media, and you know, believe it or not, like tweets from fans, I think kind of bother them sometimes when you know, all these fans see are robots on the field. They're players they plug into a fantasy lineup. It's just that the human element is kind of lost through it all, and those hot takes and opinions that just fill the airwaves. It is kind of a lost art, and I think that these players, they want their stories out there. They want people to know they're human beings with emotions like everybody else. They've been through ups and downs like everybody else, for good, for bad, and most of them are really willing to open up all about it.
Awesome. Hey, Tyler, where can people find you if they're interested?
Absolutely. Yeah, we're BuffaloNews.com. We have our Bills blog right up there, and on Twitter, I'm just at Ty Dunne, Dunne.
Sounds good. Appreciate your time, man. Thanks a lot.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Brian. Great time.
Yeah.